Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Physics Corner with your host, Jake. Glad you could join me for another exciting episode of Physics Corner as we discuss my week of physics class. The journey continues in the world of physics, and this week was quite a busy one. Now that all the clerical work is out of the way, we have more time to devote to physics, and we have jumped right in. This week we started Tuesday off by doing a jigsaw activity where we got into groups of 4, and then from those groups we lettered off A through E, and then we got into separate groups. There we learned we did a graph, a position versus time graph. We were given a position versus time graph, and we then had to make the acceleration graph and the velocity graph from that and discuss that, and then we went back into our original groups, and each one of us went around and discussed the graph we did to the members of our group. That was a fun activity. It allowed us to be able to learn and really grasp this idea of these graphs, and also introduce acceleration and learn about that graph. We then started to talk about the different forces that affect our cars as they travel through the time. So we learned that there's the force of the earth, the force of the rocket, the force of the air, there's friction from the string and tires, and there is the force of the ground on the car. So there's all of these forces that affect our car and the way it will travel as it goes down the line. For those who don't know, we are doing a drag racing with little rocket dragster cars, and they hook to a string, and we put a little rocket motor in the back of them and launch them down the string. So we're learning how force is related to those cars. We're learning about acceleration, about velocity, about position. So we're learning about many different things as we go about launching these cars. We then went into Newton and learned about Newton, who is the man of force, and his 3 laws. We learned about Newton's the first law, which is the law of inertia. We learned about the law of acceleration, and lastly, we learned about the law of reciprocity. Now, the last law is the law that most people get confused with. It is the law that says for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So most people get that confused and think that action and reaction are basically 2 different things. But in fact, they're actually related. Action and reaction are related. They are together. With this, we went into force, and we learned about different forces. I learned that there's the same force that interacts between 2 objects. The force is the same. So the example used in class was a bug on a windshield. At the moment that bug hits the windshield, you would think that the car is exerting a greater amount of force. However, the force of impact is the same. So that was kind of interesting for me to grasp. It's the outcome that is different. So because the car has a greater mass, it causes a greater acceleration in the bug, which then leads to its demise. But the force that hits are equal, and it has to be equal. And it's that way between all objects. Acceleration and mass may vary, but force is the same. On Thursday, we got to launch off the rocket cars. We did a test run. Each group was going to do one test run of their vehicle, and we were recording the data so that we could use it and analyze it for our project. We're making a technical instruction manual for our project. We need to analyze this data so that we can produce graphs for the project. However, it does take quite a while to set the lineup for these cars and get the rockets in them, get them all set up. Plus, we were doing it for the first time, and most of the people involved in setting it up were men, and of course men don't do well with directions, and we had to do the very unman-like thing and read directions. So that took us a little while to get that all set up and ready, get the cameras in place, get everything set up and ready to go, and launch it off. It's quite a bit of work to launch off a car, because the car, it takes several minutes to set it up and about a second for that car to launch and make its run. Only 2 groups were able to get through this before a big old dust storm came rumbling through the valley. We had to cut the other test runs short. So unfortunately my group was not able to do a test run on their vehicle, but we are set to do that in the next class. However, we did get some good data off the other cars, so we were able to analyze that data. We went back to class, during the dust storm, and when we got into class, we downloaded that data and analyzed it. So that was pretty cool to see how that works. And as we analyzed them, we learned about motion graphs, and we learned that there's little dots on the graph, and that the closer together the dots are, the greater the acceleration is. As they spread apart and get more evenly spaced, that means that they're moving at the same velocity. The same velocity throughout. The vehicle that we analyzed had a great acceleration at the beginning, but then in a very short amount of time it hit a velocity which is maintained through most of the run until the end, and the parachute slows down. So that was quite exciting to do. We also were introduced to momentum and impulse. Momentum is related to mass and velocity. I learned that momentum equals mass times velocity. And momentum is what is usually happening in a crash. So when a crash happens, there's much momentum involved. And usually the vehicle with the most momentum is going to cause the most damage. So that's the vehicle with the greatest amount of mass, moving the fastest, or might not be moving quite as fast, but having bigger mass. So the other car or the other vehicle might be smaller, but have greater velocity, but the momentum of the bigger vehicle will be greater, and it will cause more damage to the lesser, or vice versa. So that was a little bit about momentum that we learned, and impulse. Still have a little bit to learn on both of those topics. I need to learn more about momentum and how it is involved in what we are doing with our dragsters. I need to learn more about impulse and exactly what it is. It was just kind of introduced very quickly to us, and we didn't have time to really get into it. And then I just need to learn how to make the graphs from the data and get into that, and to really concrete this information I'm learning and just really grasp it and understand it. So that was pretty much the week summed up in Physics Corner. It was a very fun, interesting week, and I look forward to learning more physics and really getting to launch these cars off and understanding what exactly is happening with them as they move through the track. I do understand the forces that are involved now. I just need to learn how to use the calculations and the equations that we get from doing the data analysis. So thank you, and join me next week on Physics Corner.